Today we're going to look at the gastrointestinal system, also known as the digestive system. And because this system is so complicated and is very dense in information, I'm going to divide the lecture into at least 3 different presentations, possibly 4. This is the first presentation, and we're going to look at the function, the organization, and the regulation of the GI tract. The main functions are basically to take in nutrients, break those nutrients down into their monomers so that they can be absorbed into the bloodstream, and then those nutrients will be utilized to build tissues or do whatever the body needs to do. And then once all the nutrients have been broken down and absorbed, then anything that can't be digested, we get rid of. So let's look at this picture. What we see here is that basically your GI system is one giant tube that starts in the mouth and ends at the anus. In the mouth, we have mechanical and chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion is the physically breaking up the food into smaller and smaller bits so it can be easily swallowed. And then the chemical digestion in the mouth takes place with the salivary glands moistening the chewed up food into what's called a bolus, and then the production of salivary amylase, which begins digesting complex carbohydrates into oligocarbohydrates, disaccharides, etc. Remember from lab, we have 3 major salivary glands: the parotid gland, the sublingual gland, which is under the tongue, and the submandibular gland, which is found under the mandible. Once the food is chewed up and it's swallowed, it's going to pass through the oral pharynx. The uvula will be pushed back up so that it blocks access to the nasal cavities. And the epiglottis will cover the glottis so that food cannot go down into the trachea. The bolus will flow through to the esophagus. The esophagus is going to connect to the stomach. This is called the cardiac sphincter. Sometimes it's called the gastric esophageal sphincter. Sometimes it's called the lower esophageal sphincter. I prefer cardiac because that tells me it's at the top of the stomach. Once in the stomach, the food bolus will undergo further mechanical and chemical digestion. The stomach has muscles that are in 3 different dimensions, and they will contract and relax. This causes the churning. This churning is going to cause the food bolus to break up into a very fine chyme, which is a liquid. And then in the stomach, we have digestion mainly of proteins. We'll talk more about that in another lecture. You can see the pancreas and the liver. These are both accessory organs. The liver produces bile, which is used to digest fats, and the pancreas produces pancreatic digestive enzymes, which are used to digest the 4 major groups of macromolecules. From the stomach, the chyme is going to pass through the pyloric valve, which opens up into the duodenum. It can also be pronounced the duodenum. There in the very beginning of the duodenum, we have the opening where the pancreatic juices and the bile dump into the chyme. This is going to aid in digestion of the macromolecules. Along the way, the duodenum, the jejunum, and the ileum is where absorption of nutrients, water, vitamins, minerals, whatever your body needs gets absorbed in the small intestine. By the time the chyme reaches the ileocecal valve, which is going to be where the ileum attaches to the large intestine, then everything has been absorbed. There are a few leftover nutrients and water. In the large intestine, we're going to see mainly absorption of water, so that it goes from being, the chyme goes from being liquid to being solid. Also, the gut bacteria are going to utilize whatever leftover nutrients are available, mainly carbohydrates, and utilizing these, mainly carbohydrates and fats. Utilizing these, they will make vitamins. The vitamins will be absorbed into the bloodstream just like the water. We will go over the major parts of the large intestine when we get to that part of the anatomy. By the time the waste products reach the sigmoid colon, they're very dry compared to the chyme. They're solid, and this is what we call feces. The feces will be passed into the rectum, and given the rectum stretches, the feces will press on the internal anal sphincter, which will send a signal to the brain, hey, we gotta go poop. And if it's convenient, then you run to the bathroom and do your business. The feces, in case you haven't figured this out yet, come out via the anal canal and the anus, and that's what happens when you eat food. So, digestive processes, 6 activities. We take in food. The food gets moved through what's called the alimentary canal, all right? Swallowing, peristalsis, and segmentation. The food is digested. Remember, mechanical digestion takes place in the mouth and in the stomach. Chemical digestion takes place in the mouth, the stomach, and the small intestine. In the small intestine, nutrients are absorbed, and then in the large intestine, water and vitamins are absorbed so that the waste product becomes solid, and we have defecation. So there are 2 types of movement in the GI tract. There's peristalsis and segmentation. And basically, peristalsis is when the muscles of the GI tract contract behind the food bolus and propel it forward. In segmentation, what we see, and this is going to be in the stomach and even in the small intestines, in the large intestines, but basically the muscles are going to contract and relax in 3 dimensions and mix everything. And so this helps with mechanical digestion and can also help with propulsion, moving the food bolus forward. So let's look again. And here you need to make sure that you write down these 6 steps in your notes and you know where each step takes place. Ingestion. In the mouth, we have mechanical and chemical digestion, mechanical breakdown, propulsion in the esophagus. It also takes place in the stomach, in the small intestine, and the large intestine. Digestion is mechanical digestion will occur in the stomach as the stomach moves the food around. Chemical digestion will take place in the stomach, in the small intestines. Then the food or the nutrients will be absorbed into the capillary systems of the hepatic portal system, and fat will be absorbed into the lymph vessels. Once the chyme reaches the ileocecal valve, then it passes into the large intestine, and throughout this passage through the large intestine, water will be reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. This will dry out the chyme into feces, and then the feces will be expelled via defecation. So next, we're going to talk about how is the digestive system organized. So we have to look at where is the digestive system situated physically in the body. And it's in the abdominal cavity. And the abdominal cavity is lined by the peritoneum. The visceral peritoneum is going to be stuck to the surface of the digestive organs, and the parietal peritoneum is stuck to the body wall. In between these two layers is a fluid called peritoneal fluid, and basically it lubricates. So when the organs are moving, the two membranes don't rub up against each other and cause friction. In between all of the digestive organs, we have the mesentery. And this is going to provide a way for the organs to stay in place. It's filled with fat, so fat storage. And then this is where we're going to find all the circulatory system, lymphatics, and nerves that service the gastrointestinal system in the peritoneum. So intraperitoneal organs are within the peritoneum itself, and the pancreas, the duodenum, and some parts of the large intestine are called retroperitoneal because the peritoneum does not cover them. You've probably heard of peritonitis. This is, itis means inflammation. Perito means the peritoneum. Oftentimes we see this because the peritoneum, the abdominal cavity, has been pierced by some kind of wound, or maybe the appendix has ruptured, or sometimes an ovarian cyst may rupture and cause peritonitis. So it is lethal because of all of the blood vessels that are found in the mesentery can absorb any bacteria or toxins, and so it really has to be carefully managed. Usually requires surgery where they lavage the abdominal cavity with sterile saline, and then with antibiotics, and then via IV the intravenous drugs. So we looked at the histology of the GI tract in lab, And so you need to know that there are the same 4 basic layers. You need to know these basic layers. And these should look rather similar to something else we have studied. So, surrounding the lumen is the mucosa. Outside of that is the submucosa. Outside of that is the muscularis externa. And on the very outside of the GI tract is the serosa. Sometimes it is called the adventitia. Let's just call it the serosa. So the mucosa secretes mucus, digestive enzymes, hormones. It absorbs the nutrients, and then it provides a physical barrier against infectious diseases. It's made up of the epithelium, the lamina propria, and the muscularis mucosae. This should sound very familiar. The epithelium is going to be simple columnar, and it has goblet cells in it, which you remember secrete mucus. The mouth, esophagus, and anus have stratified squamous epithelium because those are areas where there's a lot of stretch and there's a lot of contact with foreign things, and so they need to have extra protection of the stratified squamous epithelium. The epithelium will secrete mucus, and of course this is going to help everything to flow, yay. And then depending on where it's in, such as the stomach and the small intestines, it will secrete enzymes and hormones. The lamina propria is where we're going to find the capillaries that are needed to absorb the nutrients and the lymph follicles. Do you remember the mucosal associated lymph tissues from our study in immunology? And these are going to provide antibodies and immune defense. Then the muscularis mucosae, smooth muscle, and this is going to help everything to move along. So here's a picture. Please pay attention. Look at the mucosa and its 3 layers, the submucosa, the muscularis externa, and the serosa. What do you notice about the mucosa and the submucosa? Take a good look. So the submucosa is connective tissue, and it contains blood and lymphatic vessels, lymphoid follicles, nerve plexus. These are all going to supply the GI tract tissue, not necessarily absorb nutrients, but to provide nutrients, oxygen, exchange of gases with the surrounding gut tissues. There's a lot of elastic tissue. That makes a lot of sense since everything has to move, and you need the ability to contract, relax, enlarge, and relax. The muscularis externa is responsible for segmentation and peristalsis. Wouldn't that be a good test question? Which layer of the GI tract is responsible for segmentation and peristalsis? That's a really good test question. Where organs meet and connect, the muscularis externa will thicken and form what we call sphincters. The serosa is mainly for holding everything in place. All right? There are 2 different blood supplies. Now here, I want you to stop and think about how God created our bodies so that they would be the most efficient. The hepatic portal system is what takes up the nutrient-rich blood. So the capillaries that are responsible for absorbing all the nutrients in the water drain into the hepatic portal system. And those vessels are going to go to the liver. The splanchnic, say that again, splanchnic circulation is the artery that is necessary to make sure the tissues of the digestive organs have all the oxygen that they need. So the last part of this lecture is how is the digestive system controlled. The digestive system has its own nervous system called the enteric nervous system, and this nervous system basically has more neurons in it than the spinal cord does. There are two basic connecting plexus, the submucosal nerve plexus, which regulates the glands and the smooth muscle, and then the myenteric nerve plexus, which controls the GI tract motility. So the myenteric is going to be associated with the muscularis. There are two types of reflexes, short and long. Short is responding to some kind of stimulus in the GI tract, whereas the long reflexes are responding to some kind of stimulus from the central nervous system. Remember that the parasympathetic system is going to make us relax and help us digest, and the sympathetic nervous system, which is what we're kind of all feeling right now, we're stressed, and when we're stressed, then digestion gets inhibited. So we look at this figure 23.7. If there's some kind of external stimulus, I think I walk out and I smell popcorn, I instantly get hungry. And so that is from my central nervous system. It's going, oh, popcorn, this smells good. I think we need to eat some. So what we see is that the central nervous system is going to send a message to the gut, and the effectors, that's going to stimulate effectors, and the response may be that our stomach starts to churn and says, popcorn sure does sound good. Feed me. Now from the gut, these are the short reflexes. And so basically when your stomach gets empty and or your duodenum is empty, it says, we're empty. This is not good. We need food. And it will send some kind of message. It may be chemical, maybe mechanical with your stomach cramping, to the central nervous system that says, find food. Now find food. And we go into food search mode. Isn't that interesting? Yep. Your gut is going to control your brain. 3 key concepts. Digestive activity is going to be stimulated by mechanical and chemical stimuli. Effectors of the gut activity are going to be the smooth muscle and the glands. The smooth muscle and the glands. And these are going to be controlled by reflexes. This is the end of lecture 1. So I want to encourage you to take some time to go stretch, to go back and listen, look at this again, check with your notes what you've written down as important, And please, please, please make sure that you do those learning objectives. If you need help, you can always reach me via email. All right? And I will be setting up a discussion board soon where you can ask questions or we can discuss concepts that maybe are a little bit evasive at the moment. I will see you in Lecture 2.